The morning sky was clear and bright when Emily Carter stepped into the busy airport terminal. She carried a small black handbag and a ticket that seemed like nothing more than a simple piece of paper to anyone else. She was just like every other passenger rushing through the crowd, waiting in line, and glancing at departure boards. Emily was calm and quiet, her dark hair tied neatly, her eyes sharp yet gentle. To the world, she was only a school teacher traveling from Denver to Washington. But deep inside, she carried memories of another life, one she had locked away for years. The flight was an ordinary one, or at least that's what everyone thought. People were smiling, talking to their loved ones, dragging suitcases, and lining up for coffee. Businessmen typed on their laptops. Families tried to calm their children. Travelers looked impatient as the boarding announcement echoed across the hall. Emily stayed apart from the noise, standing in her line, her ticket in hand. She didn't need much luggage because she believed in traveling light. Her seat was near the window, which she preferred. It gave her space to think. When she boarded, the flight attendants welcomed her with warm smiles, treating her as just another face in the crowd. Emily thanked them politely and walked down the narrow aisle. Her seat was halfway through the plane, near the wing. She slid her bag under the seat, pulled out a book, and rested back. The cabin smelled of fresh coffee, the sound of overhead bins closing filled the air, and the captain's confident voice reassured everyone that the journey would be smooth. Emily thought it was just another flight. Around her, conversations began to grow. A group of college students sitting nearby whispered about their plans in Washington. A businessman beside her kept checking his phone nervously, his suit slightly wrinkled. An elderly couple across the aisle smiled kindly at the flight attendants and asked questions about the landing time. Emily watched it all quietly. She didn't speak much, but she observed everything. Years of her old career had trained her to notice details others missed, small things like how a passenger's eyes darted nervously or how the engines hummed at a slightly different pitch during takeoff. The plane taxied down the runway, and Emily felt the familiar push of the engines as the aircraft lifted into the sky. She had flown many times before, but there was always something magical about watching the ground fall away and the clouds opening up like a sea of white. She relaxed, leaned against her seat, and opened her book. To anyone watching, she was just another woman enjoying a quiet journey. But even as she read, her mind wandered. Emily had not always been a teacher. Years ago, she had been an engineer, working deep inside Air Force bases. She had spent long nights with blueprints, designing safety systems, checking technical manuals, and walking across airstrips lit by floodlights. She had once helped improve the very jets that now guarded the skies. But she had walked away from that life, tired of the weight of responsibility, choosing instead a peaceful path of teaching young minds. She never told her students or colleagues about her past. To them, she was simply Miss Carter, the kind teacher who explained science in easy words. The flight continued quietly for the first hour. Flight attendants rolled carts down the aisle, offering drinks and snacks. Laughter came from one corner, where children were entertained by coloring books. The businessman beside Emily finally put his phone away, closing his eyes for a quick nap. Emily sipped her water, stared out at the clouds, and felt grateful for the calmness. She had no idea how quickly that calm would change. At first, it was small. A shadow flickered across her window, moving too fast to be another passenger jet. She frowned and leaned closer. The wing of the aircraft glistened under the sun, and beyond it, far in the blue distance, something moved. Another shape. Then another. She blinked. They were not passenger planes. Their sharp outlines, their sleek design, there was no mistaking them. F-16s. Emily's heart beat a little faster. She sat straighter, her book forgotten. The passengers around her hadn't noticed yet. A mother was feeding her child. The students were laughing about a joke. But Emily's eyes stayed fixed outside. Two F-16s, flying lower than usual, cutting through the air near their commercial flight. And something didn't look right. Their formation was uneven, their movement unsteady, as if one of them was in trouble. Then the whispers began. A man 2 rows ahead looked out and gasped. Someone else leaned across the aisle to check. Soon, heads turned toward the windows, and uneasy murmurs filled the cabin. Why are there fighter jets? Is something wrong? Are we in danger? The calm atmosphere broke apart, replaced by fear and uncertainty. Emily kept watching. She noticed the way one F-16 tilted slightly, smoke trailing faintly from its engine. It was struggling. The other jet flew close, almost protective, signaling something Emily understood instantly. They were in distress. But why were they so close to a passenger plane? Her mind raced. Normally, jets in trouble would call for military support or base guidance, not involve a civilian flight. Unless this was more serious than it appeared. The captain's voice came on, tense but steady. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been contacted by the Air Force. Please remain calm and stay seated. We are in communication and everything is under control. But the captain's tone betrayed the truth. Something unusual was happening. Fear spread quickly. Some passengers clutched their loved ones. A few prayed quietly. Others pulled out their phones, filming through the windows. The elderly couple across the aisle whispered nervously, holding hands tightly. The businessman beside Emily woke up, confused, until he noticed the jets outside. His face turned pale. Emily, however, stayed calm. Her breathing was steady, her eyes sharp. She could read the situation better than anyone else on board. She had seen drills like this before. She had studied these aircraft for years. She knew the signs of mechanical failure, the subtle changes in flight patterns, the desperate maneuvers of pilots trying to keep control. And most of all, she recognized the danger. If one of those F-16s failed completely, the consequences could be catastrophic. Then, another shadow crossed the sky, this time larger, heavier, and slower. The unmistakable shape of an A-10 Thunderbolt, known as the Warthog, appeared beneath them. Its broad wings and powerful engines made it look both rugged and unbreakable. Unlike the sleek F-16s, the A-10 was built for toughness and survival. It circled with calm authority, almost as if guarding the passenger flight. Now the passengers were truly panicking. Some thought war had broken out. Others cried. The flight attendants tried to calm people, but even their hands shook. The captain's voice came again, but this time even more careful. Ladies and gentlemen, we are cooperating fully with military instructions. Please remain seated and trust that we are safe. Emily's mind worked quickly. She knew the A-10 wasn't there by chance. It had been sent as backup, a shield, maybe even a last line of defense. She also knew something else: the F-16s must have called for help. But why direct their signals to a civilian flight? Unless, Emily thought, the solution they needed was on this very plane. She gripped her armrest, her instincts fully awake now. Her peaceful journey was over. She was no longer just a teacher with a book in her hand. The past she had buried was rising again, and the skies above demanded her attention. What started as a normal flight had now become a stage for something extraordinary. Emily Carter was just a passenger. But the F-16s were crying for help, and the A-10 had answered the call. And she knew deep inside, whether she liked it or not, her role in this unfolding drama was about to begin. The silence inside the cabin was heavy, broken only by gasps and whispered questions from frightened passengers. Every eye was drawn toward the windows, where the two F-16s flew unsteadily beside the commercial plane. Their sleek gray bodies shimmered under the sunlight, but something was wrong. One jet tilted slightly, struggling to hold its place, while the other stayed close, as though guarding its partner. Smoke, faint but visible, trailed from the weaker fighter's engine. It was the kind of sight that made people's hearts tighten with dread. Emily Carter's sharp eyes caught every detail. The angle of the struggling F-16, the way it tried to steady itself but kept faltering, the way the second jet adjusted speed to cover its partner, all of it spoke volumes to her. She had spent years studying and working on these aircraft during her time as an Air Force engineer. She knew what failure looked like, and she knew this wasn't routine. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere shifted from confusion to fear. A young mother hugged her toddler against her chest, whispering comfort even though her own voice trembled. The elderly couple across from Emily clutched each other's hands tightly. The businessman beside her wiped sweat from his forehead, muttering, "This can't be happening." College students who had been laughing earlier were now wide-eyed, pressing their faces against the glass to capture shaky videos. Panic spread in waves, but Emily stayed calm, her face unreadable as she studied the sky. Suddenly, another aircraft appeared. Its wide wings, heavy frame, and unmistakable design caused a stir among passengers who had some knowledge of planes. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, also known as the Warthog, approached with a sense of authority. Unlike the F-16s, the A-10 was not built for speed or elegance, it was built for power and endurance. The Warthog flew beneath the passenger plane, its presence both reassuring and alarming at the same time. People whispered nervously, pointing and asking why such a military machine was flying so close. Emily's mind raced. She remembered the days when she had helped draft safety systems for fighter jets, working in hangars filled with the smell of fuel and metal, listening to the deep rumble of engines. She recalled long hours spent studying how different aircraft responded under stress. She knew why the A-10 was here. It wasn't just an escort. It was backup. Something serious was unfolding, and the commercial flight had been caught in the middle. The captain's voice returned, calm but tense, "Ladies and gentlemen, we ask you to stay in your seats. We have been contacted by military command. Everything is under control." But his words, meant to soothe, only deepened the worry. People could hear the strain in his tone. A few passengers began to cry quietly. Others gripped their armrests tightly. Emily leaned closer to the window, her mind working like it used to during her Air Force days. The injured F-16 was signaling distress, and the other jet was relaying those signals. She remembered the special codes and maneuvers pilots used when radio communication was limited or failing. She could almost read the language of the sky. The A-10's presence confirmed it, they were preparing for an emergency. The flight attendants moved through the aisle, their smiles forced but kind. "Please stay calm," they said softly. But their hands shook as they served water, and their eyes darted nervously toward the windows. Emily noticed. Years of training had made her sensitive to even the smallest changes in behavior. Fear was spreading, and it needed to be controlled before panic grew out of hand. The cabin was filled with a mix of emotions. Some passengers prayed. Some whispered frantically to loved ones. A few tried to stay strong, speaking in firm voices that betrayed their own nerves. Emily, however, remained steady. Her calmness stood out. The businessman beside her finally looked at her and whispered, "Do you think we're in danger?" Emily glanced at him, her expression serious but gentle. "We're safe for now," she replied softly. But deep inside, she knew the situation was fragile. As the minutes ticked by, the drama outside the window grew. The damaged F-16 dipped lower, then climbed shakily back into formation. The second jet flew dangerously close, trying to shield it. The A-10 circled like a guardian, positioning itself in a way that suggested it was ready to act if the worst happened. The passengers gasped as they watched the dance of machines in the sky, completely unaware of the full meaning. Emily could feel her old instincts rising. She didn't want them to. She had left that life behind, choosing instead the peace of teaching, of chalk dust on her fingers instead of oil from an engine. But here, now, she couldn't ignore what she knew. This wasn't just a random incident. This was an emergency, and she might be the only one on this flight with the knowledge to help. Then came the moment that changed everything. The captain's voice once again filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've received a request from the Air Force. They need assistance with communication and systems. If anyone on board has advanced aviation or military experience, please identify yourself." The words froze the air. Passengers looked around at each other, confusion and disbelief on their faces. Some shook their heads. Others muttered nervously. But no one moved. The flight attendants stood waiting, scanning the rows with hopeful but anxious eyes. For a long moment, silence hung like a heavy blanket. Emily felt her chest tighten. She knew what this meant. The Air Force wouldn't ask unless the situation was urgent. She thought of the pilots in those jets, young men or women fighting to stay alive in their machines. She thought of the A-10 circling below, its pilot ready to make decisions that could change everything. She thought of the frightened passengers around her, their lives hanging on forces they didn't understand. She closed her book, her decision made. Slowly, quietly, she unbuckled her seat belt and stood. Heads turned instantly. Whispers ran through the cabin. Who is she? Why is she standing? The flight attendants hurried toward her, their eyes wide with both relief and surprise. Emily met their gaze with calm determination. "I can help," she said simply. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of truth. The passengers stared as if they were seeing her for the first time. Just minutes ago, she had been another quiet traveler in row 17. Now she was stepping forward into something far greater. The crew guided her toward the front of the plane, past rows of astonished faces. Some passengers whispered prayers for her. Others simply watched in awe. As Emily walked toward the cockpit, she felt her old life rising to the surface, piece by piece. The life she had buried was no longer hidden. She was no longer just Emily Carter, the school teacher. She was the engineer who had once written manuals, designed systems, and worked side by side with pilots who trusted her knowledge with their lives. And now, the skies were calling her back. The F-16s cried for help. The A-10 answered the call. And Emily Carter was about to step into the center of it all. Emily stepped into the narrow cockpit, her heart steady though the weight of the moment pressed hard on her shoulders. The two pilots in the front turned their heads quickly, surprised to see a passenger entering. Their faces were tight with focus, their voices clipped as they spoke into their radios, receiving hurried instructions from ground control. One of the flight attendants introduced her quickly. "She says she has experience. Aviation engineering. Military background." The captain, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes, studied Emily for a second. He could tell from her calm presence that she wasn't exaggerating. "What do you know?" he asked urgently. Emily stepped closer, her eyes scanning the instrument panels, then out the window where the jet still struggled. "Those F-16s aren't just escorting. One of them is in critical trouble. Look at the wing, he's fighting stability. If his systems fail fully, it could spiral." The co-pilot muttered, "We're told they've lost partial control, and radio connection is weak. They're trying to use visual signals." Emily nodded quickly. "Yes, I can read them. I worked on these systems for years. They need help overriding onboard controls, and I think I can guide them." For a second, silence hung in the cockpit. The captain adjusted his headset, then gave a firm nod. "All right. You're in." The radio crackled with static, the voice of Air Command faint but urgent. "Commercial Flight 227, relay to your passenger we've confirmed her credentials. Connect her to Channel 3. The co-pilot quickly handed Emily a spare headset. She hesitated for only a moment, then slipped it on, the weight of her old world falling back on her shoulders like a cloak she thought she had discarded forever. "Falcon 1, Falcon 2, this is Civilian Flight 227, relaying engineer assistance. Ground control set through static. Stand by for Carter. Emily took a deep breath, then spoke clearly, "This is Emily Carter. Do you copy?" For a moment, only static answered. Then, a shaky voice came through, "Carter? As in, the Carter? You wrote the override procedure we studied." The voice belonged to the second F-16 pilot, the one flying steady beside his damaged partner. Emily closed her eyes briefly, remembering long nights spent drafting those emergency instructions. She had never thought a moment like this would come. "Yes," she answered firmly. "I know your systems. I can help. Tell me your readings." The damaged pilot's voice cracked with strain, the roar of his engine loud in the background. "Stability control failing. Left engine responsive but overheating. Right stabilizer not answering. Manual override not locking." Emily's mind raced, recalling diagrams, wiring paths, and fail-safe switches. "You need to cut the auxiliary feed to the stabilizer. Switch to backup hydraulics. But listen, do it slowly. If you rush, you'll lose full control." The cockpit of the commercial plane was silent as the crew listened. Emily's voice was calm, steady, carrying authority. She guided the pilot step by step, her tone leaving no space for panic. The A-10 pilot joined in the radio line, his deep, confident voice saying, "We've got your back. Do what she says. She knows these birds better than anyone." Passengers in the cabin couldn't hear the technical exchange, but they felt the shift in energy. The flight attendants whispered updates. Someone was helping, someone who knew exactly what to do. Eyes filled with hope instead of just fear. Parents calmed their children, college students put down their phones to pray quietly, and even the businessman who had been panicking earlier sat straighter, his expression less frantic. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Emily leaned over the co-pilot's shoulder, watching the F-16 through the glass. "That's it. Hold steady. Now reset the control loop. Bypass the automatic lock. Good. Now tell me what's your reading." The pilot's breath was heavy, but his voice steadied. "Stabilizer is responding. It's weak, but it's holding." Relief swept the cockpit like a wave. The captain let out a quiet breath, shaking his head in disbelief. "You just saved them from going down." But Emily wasn't finished. "Not yet. He needs a safe way to land, and they can't do it alone. We'll have to coordinate with the A-10. She switched channels. "Warthog, this is Carter. You're going to guide them in. Keep your position close but steady. Don't push unless necessary." The A-10 pilot chuckled faintly, even in the middle of the crisis. "Carter? Haven't heard that name in years. I trained on your manuals. Never thought I'd hear your voice in the sky." Her lips curved into the smallest smile, but her focus never wavered. "Let's make sure your training pays off today." The tension continued for long minutes as Emily worked with the pilots, guiding them through sequences she remembered like second nature. She felt herself slipping fully back into her old identity, calm under pressure, sharp in her choices, her mind balancing possibilities faster than most people could imagine. The school teacher who once lived in quiet simplicity seemed far away now. Passengers stared toward the cockpit door, whispering, "Who is she? How does she know all this?" Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the bravery of someone they had barely noticed an hour ago. Emily didn't hear their whispers. She was locked into the rhythm of survival, her voice the thread holding lives together. Step by step, she brought the failing F-16 closer to control. Step by step, she rebuilt the bridge of trust between a civilian flight and military steel in the sky. Finally, the F-16 pilot's voice came through again, stronger than before, "Stabilizer is stable. Systems are holding. I can manage." His words were filled with relief, gratitude, and disbelief that a quiet passenger from a commercial flight had just guided him out of disaster. Emily removed the headset slowly, her hands steady though her heart pounded. The captain turned to her, his face filled with admiration. "Miss Carter, I don't know who you really are, but you just changed everything." Emily glanced out the window once more. The F-16s flew straighter now, the A-10 circling with calm assurance. She leaned back slightly, whispering to herself words only she could hear, "I was just a passenger." But deep inside, she knew the truth: the past never truly lets go, and sometimes the sky itself demands that you answer its call. And this was only the beginning. The air inside the cockpit was heavy, as if every breath carried the weight of lives hanging in the balance. Emily Carter sat forward, her headset still on, her voice calm but sharp with focus. Outside the window, the two F-16s struggled through the sky. One jet held steady, while the other Falcon 1 still fought to keep its balance. The A-10 Thunderbolt circled below, its wide wings cutting through the air with an aura of protection. It was a dance of machines high above the earth, but one mistake could turn it into disaster. The captain of the passenger flight stole a glance at Emily. His voice was low but respectful. "We've got 200 people back there. I need to know, are we safe?" Emily's eyes stayed locked on the struggling jet. "You're safe for now. But if Falcon 1 fails again, the sky could get very dangerous." The captain nodded, his jaw tight, then returned to his controls. He trusted her. Somehow, everyone did now. On the radio, Falcon 1's pilot spoke again, his voice strained but steady. "Systems are responding, but controls are stiff. My gauges are redlining. Not sure how long I can hold this." Emily answered firmly, "You can hold it. You're not alone. Listen carefully. Keep your throttle just below maximum strain. Adjust micro inputs to ease the stabilizer. Don't fight the jet too hard, work with it." Her words flowed with confidence, like a teacher explaining a lesson, yet they carried the authority of someone who had spent her life inside the heartbeat of machines. The young pilot obeyed her instructions, each second buying him more time. The A-10 pilot's calm voice entered the channel. "Falcon 1, this is Warthog. I'm staying with you. If you drop, I'm diving to shield. You're not going alone." The reassurance steadied the entire channel. Emily took a deep breath. It was time for the next step. She leaned toward the co-pilot and spoke firmly, "We need to prepare for coordination with ground control. That F-16 can't stay airborne forever. They'll need to bring all of us down at the same airfield: commercial jet, F-16s, and A-10. The co-pilot's eyes widened. "All of us? At a military airfield?" "Yes," Emily replied. "It's the only way. Civilian airports aren't ready for this, and Falcon 1 doesn't have the time." The captain radioed ground control, and after tense moments of waiting, the reply came back, "Confirmed. Diverting all aircraft to Andrews Air Force Base. Emergency protocols activated." Inside the passenger cabin, tension swelled. People could feel the change in direction, the subtle shift in altitude. Some whispered that they were being hijacked. Others prayed louder. The flight attendants moved quickly, calming voices, reminding passengers to trust the crew. But every now and then, someone's eyes wandered to row 17, where the woman who had stood up earlier had disappeared into the cockpit. They didn't know her name, but whispers spread, "She's helping." Back in the cockpit, Emily kept her focus on the young pilot's voice. She guided him through one override after another, recalling systems she had once memorized down to the last bolt. Each instruction steadied the jet, but she knew they weren't out of danger. Every adjustment was like balancing on a knife's edge: one wrong move could end it all. The A-10 pilot broke in again. "Carter, you still there?" "I'm here," Emily replied. "You know, they told us about you years ago. Said if we ever got stuck with systems beyond repair, the Carter protocols were our last hope. I never thought I'd hear the author herself guiding us midair." Emily's lips tightened. She hadn't wanted recognition, not anymore. She had walked away from that life for peace. But now, peace was far away. She answered simply, "Then let's make sure they work." The descent began. The passenger jet banked slightly, its engines humming lower as it aligned with the military airfield. The F-16s followed, Falcon 2 supporting his partner, while the A-10 hovered beneath them like a guardian angel made of steel. Emily's instructions became more precise, her tone firmer. "Falcon 1, ease your speed. Don't push your engine. Trust your wingman. Let him carry the drag for you." "Copy," the pilot replied. His breathing was heavy, but his voice was steadier now. "Falcon 2, adjust to his right. Keep your distance close. Share your airflow." "Roger." Holding him steady. The cockpit of the commercial jet was tense, every crew member silent as Emily's voice guided the fighters. The captain finally whispered, "I've flown for 25 years and never seen anything like this." Through the windows, the ground grew closer. The long, gray runway of Andrews Air Force Base stretched ahead, lined with emergency vehicles. Red lights flashed, trucks stood ready, and soldiers waited in formation. The scene was unreal for the passengers, who pressed their faces against the windows to see. To them, it felt like something out of a movie. As they approached final descent, Falcon 1's voice shook. Controls failing again left stabilizer slipping. Emily's heart tightened, but she didn't hesitate. "Stay with me. Switch to backup hydraulics now. Don't fight the fall, angle your wings slightly. Falcon 2, brace him on the left. Warthog, adjust position in case we lose him." For a terrifying moment, Falcon 1 dipped hard, and the passengers gasped as the fighter jet dropped lower. But with Emily's instructions, the pilot regained control, climbing back into line. "Stabilizer responding, barely," the pilot said, his voice breaking. "You're doing it," Emily said firmly. "You're almost there. Hold steady for the runway." The commercial jet aligned with the airfield, its passengers clutching their seats. The captain announced over the intercom, his voice measured but serious, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are making an emergency landing. Please remain calm and stay seated." People prayed, cried, and held each other tightly. But their eyes shone with something else now: hope. They believed because someone among them had stood up and carried the weight of the sky. The ground rushed closer. The A-10 steadied its guard, Falcon 2 held tight, and Falcon 1, guided by Emily's steady words, fought for every second of balance. "Lower your gear. Keep it gentle. Trust your training," Emily said quietly, her voice like a lifeline. The response came after a long pause. "Gear down. Holding. Coming in hot." The air inside the cockpit seemed to freeze. The final moments had arrived, and the outcome was seconds away. Emily's eyes never left the struggling jet outside. She whispered one final command, "Bring her home." And with that, all eyes turned to the runway as the extraordinary landing began. The air was tense, every heartbeat stretched into eternity as the aircraft descended toward Andrews Air Force Base. The runway stretched out like a lifeline below, flashing lights marking the path. The A-10 Thunderbolt circled with steady wings, keeping guard. Falcon 2 flew close, guiding his injured partner. And Falcon 1, the wounded F-16, struggled desperately, its stabilizer trembling, its engine coughing smoke. Inside the passenger jet, people held their breath. Mothers clutched their children tighter, whispers of prayer filled the cabin, and even those who didn't normally believe in miracles whispered quietly, hoping for one. The businessman who had been pale with fear earlier now had his eyes closed, murmuring a promise that if they landed safely, he would live differently. Everyone's soul was tied to the machines in the sky. In the cockpit of the passenger jet, Emily Carter leaned forward, her eyes steady. The headset carried the voices of the pilots. Falcon 1's voice was strained, losing stability, can't hold much longer. Emily's voice came back calm, solid as a rock. You're almost there. Look at the runway. Trust your wingman. Trust your machine. She still has enough to carry you home. Falcon 2's voice cut in firmly, I've got you, partner. Lean on me. We'll take her down together. The A-10 pilot added in his deep voice, Falcon 1, stay brave. Carter's got the sky in her hands. Follow her words. Emily gave her last sequence of instructions. Reduce throttle. Angle slightly left. Don't fight the jet, guide her. Now, lower gear. Let the airfield meet you. Her voice carried a mixture of command and reassurance, the way only someone who had walked this road before could speak. Falcon 1's voice came again, trembling but steady, gear down, systems shaking, but holding. The jets lined up with the runway. The commercial plane glided above them, ready to touch down at the same field. Emergency trucks lined both sides of the tarmac, their lights painting red and blue across the night air. Soldiers stood ready, their faces tilted upward, watching history unfold above them. Then it happened. Falcon 1 dipped, nose trembling, the damaged stabilizer giving way. For a second, the entire world seemed to stop. Gasps filled the passenger cabin. But Falcon 2 slid closer, supporting the airflow with expert precision, just as Emily had directed. Falcon 1 steadied, wobbling but refusing to fall. The wheels hit the runway with a scream of rubber against concrete. First the A-10, heavy and strong, landed with certainty. Then Falcon 2, guiding his brother, touched down perfectly. Falcon 1 struck harder, its stabilizer nearly giving out, sparks flying briefly, but it stayed upright. It rolled, shuddering, until it slowed to a stop. A cheer erupted across the runway and inside the passenger jet. The commercial plane came down last, gliding smoothly onto the runway, guided by experienced hands and steady engines. The moment its wheels touched the ground, applause broke out in the cabin. People cried, laughed, and hugged one another. Hope had turned into triumph. Emily finally took off her headset, her hands steady but her heart pounding. The captain turned to her, eyes full of gratitude. You didn't just help. You saved lives, ours and theirs. Emily simply nodded. She didn't seek praise. She only felt relief that everyone was safe. When the passenger plane stopped and the doors opened, the air outside was filled with flashing lights and rushing figures. Military officers, paramedics, and emergency crews surrounded the aircraft. The passengers disembarked one by one, stepping onto the runway with trembling legs and teary eyes. Some turned back to look at the jets, their bodies resting on the tarmac, alive thanks to one woman's knowledge and courage. Emily tried to move quietly, blending into the stream of passengers. She never enjoyed the spotlight. But her attempt to disappear failed. A senior Air Force commander stepped forward, saluting her as if she were still in uniform. Carter, he said with respect. We never thought we'd see you in action again. But tonight, the skies belong to you. Passengers overheard, and whispers ran quickly, her name is Carter, she saved the jets, she's not just a teacher. The truth spread like fire. Phones flashed as people recorded her, their voices filled with awe. She had boarded the flight as a quiet woman with a book, but she walked off it as a hero. Reporters gathered, already shouting questions. Who are you? How did you save them? Are you really the Carter from the Air Force? Emily kept her answers short, her voice humble. I only did what was needed. The real heroes are the pilots who fought their machines and trusted me to guide them. But the commander shook his head. Without you, they wouldn't have made it home. He saluted again, and nearby soldiers followed, their hands raised in respect. The passengers stood in clusters, watching with awe. The businessman who had panicked earlier wiped tears from his face, whispering, "I'll never forget her." The elderly couple held hands, saying softly, "She was heaven sent." The young mother kissed her child's forehead, whispering, "That woman saved us all." Emily looked at them with gentle eyes. She didn't see herself as a savior. She had only answered a call she thought she'd left behind years ago. But tonight had reminded her that the past never truly fades. Knowledge, courage, and responsibility live inside, waiting for the moment they're needed most. By the time the night ended, the news had already spread across the country. Headlines glowed on screens: "She was just a passenger until F-16s cried for help and the A-10 answered the call." Footage showed the jets landing, the emergency crews rushing, and a quiet woman guiding everyone to safety. Social media filled with videos of her walking down the steps of the plane, calm and humble, as though she hadn't just saved lives and written a new page of aviation history. Emily refused interviews beyond a few short words. She returned to her quiet life, back to her classroom, her chalkboards, and her students. To them, she was still Miss Carter, the teacher who explained science in simple words. Most would never know that their teacher had once carried the sky on her shoulders. But those who had been on Flight 227 would never forget. They would tell their children and grandchildren about the woman who rose from her seat when everyone else froze. They would speak of the moment when fighter jets cried for help, the A-10 answered, and one ordinary passenger revealed herself to be extraordinary. And Emily Carter, walking quietly through life, carried only one truth in her heart that night: she wasn't just a passenger. She was the bridge between fear and survival, between chaos and calm, between falling and flying.